Thanks a lot, Michael. This was really great, and it's always great to see these new cool applications of of relatively new technologies. And I have the impression that we're only at the beginning, right? I mean, I think the more traditional interfaces, touch points like websites and applications, mobile apps will definitely stay, just like email has been here for quite a while. But I truly believe that this is only the beginning, and that we'll see much more touch points, interfaces where brands can connect with their audiences and vice versa. By the way, what is the coolest interface that you have seen recently, if you mind asking me?
Certainly. I would say, going back to that example of the virtual reality interface and immersing yourself in a workplace, and you're actually standing in front, or appear to be standing in front of a big piece of machinery you've got to learn, but you're sitting actually in your home office or another location or an airport waiting lounge. That's pretty cool. The voice interfaces, I think, are very cool, Stefan, especially the natural sounding voice interfaces are getting so clever in how they're rendered, where they're just human enough to make a conversation and sound natural.
Yeah. How natural is natural sounding voice in your opinion? I mean, I think a lot of people have seen that YouTube video when I think they just launched it. But what's your take on that, on how natural it is?
Sure. So our audience at the end of the webinar could check out Google Duplex. It was announced last May, but it's essentially a voice interface that features things like that we always use, whether we want to or not, which are ums and ahs and natural pauses in our dialogue flow, even when we're not doing webinars. And that's how we talk. And the solution renders that and allows for those pauses when engaging examples like in the lost credit card scenario. And when the person's listening on the phone, it's a very natural sounding dialogue for them to want to help. They're not talking to a robot necessarily. Well, I mean, they are technically, but they're encouraged by the way it sounds to want to help and to want to engage.
Right. Yeah. I mean, no, I couldn't agree more. And you guys are really, focused on smarter interfaces, right? Is it fair to say that it's Myplanet's core business? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
And when organizations get inspired by this and they want to take the next step with smarter interfaces, what are the typical areas that you guys see that they're struggling with when they get started?
That's a good question. And that could be a whole nother webinar to some level, but I guess dipping your toe into anything new, there's the fear of not knowing what you don't know. That would be the first thing. So I don't even know where to start. What is my strategy? If someone says I need a voice strategy, well, what are the components of a voice strategy, to start with? And then what is my strategy thereafter? So that's certainly one area. Another is like any new strategy we see, getting buy-in and making the case for the smarter interface strategy. We always like to know that there's a stakeholder somewhere in a project on the client side that is being kept up at night by something that is bothering them. And when you have that stakeholder that literally is thinking about this outcome as a problem or something that can be improved upon, that is where a smarter interface project really starts to sing. When there isn't that person and it's simply a pet project or something they want to get around to sometime, that becomes a struggle, as I'm sure you've seen as well in your business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, and actually, we see the same with for a number of years in the content management space, right? Although personalization is getting more commoditized, you still see people that when they're selecting and evaluating CMSs, they're pretty adamant about having personalization and content targeting capabilities while they're not ready for it. right? They don't have, a strategy around personalization from a marketing perspective. So then you end up with the CMS that has the capabilities, but your whole organization and your marketing strategy is non-existing. So we definitely see that, and you also see that with artificial intelligence, obviously, which I think is really in an early stage. And then I mean artificial intelligence applied into the world of content management, right? So really that curation and content management process. It's obviously already applied in personalization, and particularly in the retail space, where you can, browse through products and search. That's absolutely already maturing as a technology, but in the core content management process, not so much. So we definitely see similarities there, and most people just simply want to re-platform and move off their legacy technology and basically build a foundation for the next 5 to 10 years, right? So they obviously still have enough time to start developing those strategies. How long would it take, going back to the smarter interfaces? How long would it take to develop an AR experience? What is your experience with that?
The smart agency person in me will say, well, that all depends on your scope and requirements for that to be safe. But honestly, because we've got people on the call are going to say, you said it would take 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's recorded.
It can actually take a few weeks to do the rendering. The part you saw of that car, I mean, it's not, the toolkit's very robust, and it's very easy to render this stuff and to make it work and behave in a certain way. The longer time is really the upfront strategy. What is it you want to render? What is the personalization strategy? What market are you going after? What's the next best action? But the actual, I guess, the handiwork involved, putting together the imagery you see, it can be done quite literally in a few weeks. The visuals, the broader piece obviously is what are you going to show? What's a greater strategy, which is always done, of course, beforehand.
Great. Yeah. Do you guys proof of concepts as well before customers want to commit to a specific interface or technology?
Certainly. I mean, anything you saw, anything our guests today have seen in our webinar, if they want to start slowly and say, we have something in mind where we want to try for this product or this market or this site, because we have many sites. We've often done proof of concepts, and they yield a proof point for a bigger project. So that's certainly something we're open to.
Right. No, that's good to know. I mean, we're huge fans of proof of concepts, right? I mean, even in our more traditional technology, like content management, I mean, it's pretty commoditized, and as you know, we see that as really a very elegant tactic to support the CMS evaluation process, right? Because you typically tend to stick to 5 to 10 years, so you don't want to replace your CMS every year or every other year. That's a huge endeavor. So it really makes sense to spend the right amount of time on the evaluation to make that decision. And then that's where POCs are very helpful for customers. So I definitely would love to do a POC with some of these technologies and dotCMS. So if there's an opportunity, I know who to call, Michael.
Yeah, and also I'll add, depending on the opportunity, we'd even help fund it. So there's some incentive there.
Well, there you go. Well, that's a call out to all the customers, prospects that are out there. And you are recorded, Michael, so we'll
I'm on
keep
the
you honest. And speaking about replatforming and migration, right? So how does the adoption of smarter interfaces compare to traditional interfaces like websites and mobile apps? And with adoption, I mean not only I mean the implementation, plus also the internal adoption by end users and potentially developers. What are the typical numbers or aspects that you see there?
Sure. So, I mean, if we think of the past, and one scenario you've just described is the migration from desktop to mobile web. This was two lines that eventually crossed, and now they're in the rear view mirror. So there's definitely been an adoption to taking in content through mobile, and we saw that coming. It happened, and now it's the way people do things. And we see smarter interfaces in a similar way. And if I go back to sort of the voice interface, which is what I was highlighting earlier, I did mention that Adobe study, and it's available online. It was done this year, actually, just to play that out a bit more. What was interesting to me when you look at things like adoption is one of the findings was that only 10% surveyed were not familiar with voice interfaces, meaning 90% were and knew what they were all about. And so that's a big step towards having a positive adoption to a smart interface. And then when you kind of dug a little deeper and you sort of see, well, what were some of the top score items within voice? Well, voice via mobile was certainly one of the top score items. In other words, using your phone, using a voice interface on your phone to then do something. And when it came to the do something part, one area of highest adoption was around search. That was the highest use case in this study, with essentially only 11% not using voice to search.
Yeah.
And when you think of then searching, well, what are some of the things people are searching for? What are some of the use cases where people have adopted search to do things? And again, this Adobe study was quoting things like food and groceries as being some of the top items where it's done through mobile, it's done through voice, and essentially, hey, I'm hungry, I need some takeout or whatever it might be, or add a dozen apples to my last grocery order. These are areas where we're seeing some of the highest adoption, and studies seem to back it up.
Great, no, that's very helpful. I definitely will look into this Adobe study for sure. Yeah, I would like to wrap up this fireside for now, Michael. I want to see if we have some questions from the audience, and I have one question here about stakeholders. What type of people do you see as key stakeholders on the client side to make this strategy happen? Good question.
Yeah, so going back to the question around what are some of the areas organizations will struggle with, and I mentioned that person being kept up at night because there's a problem. Yeah. Let's look at that person as a stakeholder. So where do they reside in the organization? So the typical people we see as stakeholders on the client side are in things like retail leadership roles. So some of the retail examples I gave you, these would be people obviously who have leadership within retail. So for example, a bank has a retail arm, so people in that department. Retailers themselves, of course, have leadership. The second group of stakeholders would be people who are tasked with strategy within the company. They're being asked by their C-suite, what's our voice strategy? Okay, I guess I better find one. What's our conversational interface strategy? I mean, these people read these studies on airplanes and in their downtime, and they come to the office with questions. So the strategy people are certainly stakeholders. And then the third stakeholders would be people on the innovation side, product development teams, skunkworks teams. These are people that are tasked to develop and build products and to innovate within a company. They are always looking for the next way to do what they do. And definitely if they see something they like or don't like, they can make it very easy or challenging for a smarter interface play to see the light of day.
Yeah, that great, thank you. And that actually triggered a question I had as well. I mean, you talk a lot about best next action. Can you tell a little bit more about that, please?
Sure. So I've mentioned it a few times, and it comes right back to personalization, which you sort of started off our discussion with. So anytime you personalize a experience, the desired outcome is for somebody to do the thing next that makes the most sense for them and you. And so we kind of talk about best next action, because essentially once someone has seen content or some sort of a proposition through one type of interface or another, there is something they want to do next, or something they should do next if the system is working correctly. And that could be to purchase, to go to to look at more content, to opt in to see a webinar, to reach out to a sales rep, to go to a conference, or to not do anything at all if they're not qualified.
Yeah.
And if the next action is not the best action, then essentially you're just gumming up the system, as I like to put it simply. You know, you've got people who are confused. They're, you know, if I go on to a site and I'm looking at, one type of a product, and I go back to that site and that site doesn't remember me from the last time I was there, my next action might not be to go to that site again. If I go back to the site and I see where I left off, or it's showing me no content related to the fact that I was searching for product A, not product B, my next action is a lot better because now I'm inquiring more, perhaps buying that product. So that is the ultimate goal, is no matter who's looking at this content and all they've seen, in the examples we've showed today, they're all going to have the best way forward to do something next, the right on-ramp or off-ramp, off the highway, so to speak. And that is what it's all about.
Great. No, thanks for clarifying that. I got one more question from the audience. Do you think that smarter faces supplement more traditional interfaces like web and mobile apps, or that some of these traditional touch points will be substituted with smart ones? Interesting.
Yeah, I think of those platforms as enabling smart interfaces. I mean, as you saw earlier, a lot of these smart interfaces run off of mobile. I mean, the AR configurator was looking through your phone. That Mercedes sedan was viewed through an iPhone. The immersive and digital end caps is through your mobile device. Voice or a conversational chatbot, such as the one for that insurance company, where it's saying, would you like to submit another dental claim, which is a best next action example, could be through desktop. So these are all means to an end. I wouldn't say it eliminates any of them, but rather those interfaces enable the smarter action that might happen next.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. This actually we've run out of questions. No more questions from the audience. I think we should wrap up, Michael. I really enjoyed this topic and doing this together with you, and I certainly look forward to work with Myplanet on smarter interfaces, do a POC or what have you, or just do a webinar on a different topic that's close to both our hearts. But in any case, again, I'd like to thank you very much for your contribution today, and I also would like to thank everybody else on the call, and have a great day.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.